All right, guys. So the Trump administration has been absolutely unraveling over the last couple of days in the aftermath of top cabinet officials accidentally adding a journalist from The Atlantic to a private signal chat where they were discussing their upcoming plans to bomb the Houthis in Yemen. So there's a lot that I want to get to here. We're going to get to some of the coping and seething and the bald-faced lies that some of these people have been going with in front of Congress in some hearings that are going on today and yesterday. But first, I just want to give you the rundown in terms of the latest that we have here from The Guardian. So initially, this journalist, Goldberg, from The Atlantic, didn't really release much specific information about what was going on in these chats because it seems like his priority was to protect the national security apparatus over, informing the people of what was actually going on. But since then, they've released more, and it's just gotten more and more wild as time has gone on. So let's go ahead and dig in here from The Guardian. They say The Atlantic magazine has published fresh messages from a group chat amongst top U.S. officials in which they discuss specific operational details of plans to bomb Yemen, spurring leading Democrats to accuse Trump administration officials of lying to Congress, which they basically 100% did, by claiming that the messages did not contain classified information. They say the initial revelations by the magazine and its editor, Jeffrey Goldberg, who was accidentally added to the chat on the messaging app Signal, have sparked huge outcry in the U.S. However, the magazine did not initially include specific details, saying that it didn't want to jeopardize national security, which is kind of ridiculous looking back on the fact that they've now released all of this. They say, but as numerous Trump administration officials have claimed that none of the information shared was classified, despite the apparent inclusion of operational details of the U.S. strike on Yemen's Houthi militia, which has been attacking shipping in the Red Sea. The Atlantic said in a new article on Wednesday that it was now releasing the information. So we also had this tweet here from Trump's press secretary saying that this article that they just released today has basically vindicated them and that there were no war plans that were part of this group chat. But let's just slow down here for a second before we get to the actual text and just remind ourselves of why the Trump administration is bombing the Houthis in the first place, because this is kind of the core of the story that everybody is skipping over in favor of talking about how incompetent and how silly and ridiculous this is, and that this is a threat to the national security state, and how could they do this? But the real story here is, why is Trump bombing the Houthis? Why is he bombing Yemen and killing scores of civilians? Well, the reason that he's doing that is because after Israel broke the ceasefire in Gaza and resumed their genocide, the Houthis resumed their blockade of Israeli ships in the Red Sea, right? Which is part of their obligation under the Geneva Conventions to try to stop a genocide. That's what the Houthis are doing, right? So in order to stop this Red Sea blockade, you have two different options here. Option number one is pressure Israel to stop the genocide. Option number two is just endlessly bomb Yemen and hope that magically that somehow stops the blockade, which, keep in mind, this is something that Biden was doing under his administration as well. And we had that famous quote from Biden where he outright said, are the bombings working? No. But are they going to continue? Yes. So the bombings are nothing but just like a pointless, bloody show of force from the Trump administration. And we have to remember that's the core of the story here, not the, crazy aspect of how incompetent they are. That's important as well. But we shouldn't be bombing the Houthis in the first place. So kind of an important part that I feel like is not getting the attention that it deserves as a part of this conversation. But with that being said, let's get to the actual messages here. So this is from Pete Hegseth, right? He says, team update, time now, 11:44 ET. Weather is favorable. Just confirmed with CENTCOM that we are a go for mission launch. He's setting out explicit timetables here. 12:15, F-18s will launch first strike package. At 13:45, trigger-based F-18 first strike window starts. Target terrorist is at his known location and should be on time. Strike drones launch, MQ-9s. At 14:10, more F-18s launch, etc. 14:15, strike drones on target. So he is giving specific times of specific kinds of weapons that are going to be used at specific places. But according to the Trump administration, these are not war plans. Then what are they? Attack plans in the nature of warfare? Like, what are we talking about here? These are war plans. I don't know how you could possibly say that they're not. We had further text here, as pointed out by Ken. More here, like this one from Joe Kent and John Ratcliffe from the CIA. There is nothing time sensitive driving the timeline. We'll have the exact options in a month. The Israelis will likely take strikes and therefore ask us for more support to replenish whatever they've used against the Houthis. This is a minor factor. John Ratcliffe says, from the CIA perspective, we are mobilizing assets to support now, but a delay would not negatively impact us, etc. So, I mean, you guys can go and read this for yourself if you want to. There was one other interesting aspect of this that I did want to get to before we get to the coping and seething here from JD Vance, because some people are giving him credit for being like the one guy in this group chat who is questioning the strikes on the Houthis just at a fundamental level. So here was the JD Vance back and forth with Pete Hegseth. He said, at Pete Hegseth, if you think we should do it, let's go. I just hate bailing out Europe again. Let's just make sure our messaging is tight here. And if there are things we can do up front to minimize risk to Saudi oil facilities, we should do it. Pete Hegseth responded, VP, I fully share your loathing of European freeloading. It's pathetic. So it's like JD Vance is kind of pushing back on maybe the nature of these strikes or maybe the narrative surrounding these strikes, but he's not doing it out of a concern that these strikes are pointless and they're not going to work and that they're justifying a genocide or defending Israel's right to do a genocide in Gaza. He's not taking it from that angle. He's taking it from the angle of, I hate bailing Europe out again. So I guess his argument here is that for the US, I think it's something like only 3% of our trade goes through this area, right? So we're much less jeopardized potentially by the blockade than Europe, which is, I think, closer to like 30 or 40% of their trade goes through the Red Sea. So his point is like, we're doing these strikes and that will more positively impact Europe. Why isn't Europe doing the strikes? I guess is his argument here. And he's saying they're freeloading off of us. But again, how can you say that it's Europe freeloading off of us when we are the cause of the blockade in the first place, right? By not pushing Israel to abide by the original agreed upon ceasefire deal in Gaza. If we were pushing Israel to end the genocide, then the blockade wouldn't be happening. So it's like we are more complicit in causing the blockade and causing potential damage to Europe. It's just a bizarre argument that he feels the need to frame it in the sense of attacking European freeloaders instead of what the actual substance of this should be about. So there's JD Vance for you. Now, we move on in terms of how Trump and Fox News and all of these other people have been responding to this. But we're going to start off here with a clip of Mike Waltz, who is a national security advisor for Trump. And he is apparently the guy who added Jeffrey Goldberg to the chat. So let's go ahead and hear him explain himself in front of Trump here in a cabinet meeting.
The lesson is there's a lot of journalists in this city who have made big names for themselves, making up lies about this president, whether it's the Russia hoax or making up lies about Gold Star families. And this one in particular, I've never met, don't know, never communicated with, and we are looking into and reviewing how the heck he got into this room. But I'll tell you what, the world owes President Trump a favor. Under Biden, global shipping was shut down. Pinprick attacks, months between them, our destroyers being fired upon dozens of times. President Trump took decisive action with his national security team.
Okay, so glazing up Trump there towards the end, again, trying within the context of this to save his own ass from potentially being fired for rank incompetence. But he's glazing up Trump. He's saying you're doing what Biden couldn't by being much more aggressive and bombing the shit out of Yemen. That's sort of his argument. But towards the beginning, he just lies. He says, I never met, I don't know, I never communicated with Jeffrey Goldberg. So then why is his contact in your phone? Not only that, but why is his contact in your phone in a position where he's probably at like the top of your most recent communications? Because how else would you have accidentally added him to this Signal chat? I mean, I use Signal all the time. It's pretty easy to know who's in your chat. It's not a difficult thing to figure out, right? He wouldn't have been in your contacts if you didn't know what his number was, if you had never been communicating with him before. So this is the line that Mike Waltz is going with. It's just a hoax, like the Russia hoax, and I had nothing to do with it. I don't know how he got in this chat, even though, again, you can't just like hack into a Signal chat. You got to be added. So you added him to it. What exactly is the explanation here? Now, Trump follows up, and looks like they're circling the wagons, and Trump is protecting him a little bit here.
the person that was on just happens to be a sleazebag, so maybe that's just coincidence. I don't know.
But you are going to conduct
Would
an
it be a
investigation.
problem if
Mr.
the Atlantic
President.
released all the text messages if they're not classified?
Well, I don't know. I'd have to ask the military about that because, maybe you wouldn't want that. I don't know. I will say this, that from what I heard, the man that we're talking about, who's not somebody that I don't think most people have ever heard of, he found it very boring and he left early. He got off the line very early. So I can't speak to it other than that. So he's made up a lot of stories and I think he's basically bad for the country. But it's a failing venture, very failing venture. They're very upset. And a thing like this is publicity for them. But I don't think we should allow people that are very good, like that man sitting right at the end of the table who's done a great job. We shouldn't allow them to be hurt by it.
So he's doing the classic Trump thing here, right? Of instead of addressing any of it, he's just going to attack the outlet or the journalist who dropped the story. In this case, Jeffrey Goldberg. He's saying he's a sleazebag. He's bad for the country. The Atlantic they're a failing publication. So just disregard everything that they say. It's all a hoax. Right now, keep in mind, this Jeffrey Goldberg, he's not some, raving leftist or anything like that, to say the least. In fact, if you rewind a little bit to his earlier life, he was a pro-Iraq war advocate, and he also used to work as a prison guard for the IDF. So let's keep that in mind. This guy is not a leftist out to get Trump for some reason. He's a pretty standard, I think, you could call a neocon kind of journalist. And so there you have Trump. Now we have the DUI hire, Pete Hegseth, responding to this as he was getting off the plane. Let's go ahead and watch this clip as well.
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again. Nobody was texting war plans, and that's all I have to say about that.
I'm going to be responsible here and not disclose the things that I read and saw. I will describe them to you. The specific time of a...
Okay, so this is a Jeffrey Goldberg, the journalist in question. But again, you have Pete Hegseth just outright lying there, saying there were no war plans. We just showed you the war plans. Again, the kinds of planes and drones that are going to be used, the time of the strikes, the people that they're targeting. Like, I don't know how you could call that not war plans, but yeah, I mean, this Jeffrey Goldberg guy, listen, guys, broadly speaking, with some exceptions, but your job as a journalist is to inform the people, right? In many circumstances, at the expense of the national security state, at the expense of elites, at the expense of the U.S. government. Your job is not to protect the U.S. government or our national security interests and priorities. That's what he was doing here by withholding this information. Okay, so just to make that clear, there are many other journalists, I think, who would not have treated this in the same way that Jeffrey Goldberg did. And even with that, he's still being relentlessly attacked by the Trump administration. Now, here we have from Aaron Rupar, Mike Waltz with Laura Ingraham over on Fox News, again, insinuating that somehow Jeffrey Goldberg must have cynically hacked his way into this chat.
I built the group my job is to make sure everything's coordinated.
But how did the
execute
number? I mean, I don't mean to be pedantic here, but how did the number?
Have you ever had somebody's contact that shows their name and then you have somebody else's number there?
I never make those mistakes.
Right? You got somebody else's number on someone else's contact. So of course I didn't see this loser in the group. It looked like someone else. Now whether he did it deliberately or it happened in some other technical mean is something we're trying to figure out.
So what are we going with here? I got hacked. That's the argument, that Jeffrey Goldberg cynically changed his number and his contact profile in your phone and worked his way into the chat. I mean, again, if that was the case, then wouldn't he have published more about what was actually in these chat logs instead of backing out of them and trying to protect you? I mean, what are we doing here, guys? This is just, it's pathetic at this point. You added him to the chat, okay? Maybe you didn't know who he was. Maybe it was an accident, but you did it. Are we just going to pretend as if there was some back channel way that he worked his way into the chat? No, you added him into the fucking chat. I mean, it's just it's such pathetic cowardice. And we move on here because we also have CIA Director, again, Ratcliffe, as well as the head of the DNI, Tulsi Gabbard here, who are also, once again, just bald-faced lying in front of Congress. This is the Select Committee on Intelligence that had a hearing yesterday.
Your question was, have I participated in any other group chats sharing classified information? To be clear, I haven't participated in any signal group messaging that relates to any classified information at all.
Okay. Director Gabbard?
Senator, I have the same answer. I have not participated in any signal group chat or any other chat on another app that contained any classified information.
Okay, so if we're to take them at face value, we're saying that let's circle back here to the Pete Hegseth timeline. We're saying that none of this, if a random member of the U.S. military or somebody else within the Trump administration had publicly posted this on Twitter, or had given this to Russia or China or Iran or the Houthis or any other U.S. designated bad guys, we're saying that if they had given this information to those entities before the strikes took place, that would be considered public information, that's not a problem. This is not classified information, according to Tulsi Gabbard and John Ratcliffe. I mean, I don't know. Do you guys buy that? Is this not, this is public information. It's not an issue if other people get the precise timing, the kinds of planes, potentially where they're going to strike beforehand. That's not classified information. That's public information, according to Tulsi and John Ratcliffe there. I mean, again, just pretty openly lying about all of this. Now we have Fox News covering this, and this is great because it's like, it's such a perfect dichotomy between how they would cover this if it had been Biden or it had been any Democrat in a similar situation. Just look at how groveling Jesse Waters is here to defend what Trump did. There's just no chance they would be acting like this if it was the reverse.
Did you ever try to start a group text? You're adding people and you accidentally add the wrong person. All of a sudden, your Aunt Mary knows all your raunchy plans for the bachelor party. Well, that kind of happened today with the Trump administration. Mike Waltz was putting together a group chat on Signal, an encrypted app, with the Secretary of Defense, the VP, and a bunch of other national security officials to collaborate on whether to strike Iranian proxies in Yemen who keep firing missiles and shutting down shipping. Well, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz accidentally added a reporter to the group text, and not a good reporter. Jeffrey Goldberg from The Atlantic, one of the biggest hoax artists around. Well, he heard some things he probably shouldn't have, but could have been a wee bit of a security breach. But it's not like they homebrewed a server and then bleached it or kept classified documents in their garages next to their Corvette.
How are they still bringing up that Biden had classified documents in his garage, but you don't bring up that Trump not only had classified documents like strewn around Mar-a-Lago in like the bathroom and shit, but then refused to give them back to the point where they had to go and raid Mar-a-Lago to get the classified documents back? Like, are we just forgetting that? We can bring up the Biden stuff. We can't bring up that stuff, even though the Trump stuff was much more egregious than this. I mean, what are we talking about here? This just, again, pathetic groveling. He knows that Trump is likely to see this clip, right? And so he's going to downplay it as much as he possibly can. Imagine the energy switch. Not that I'm a fan of Biden or Hillary or anybody else in the Democratic establishment, but if they had done this, this would have been a multi-week, full-blown hysterical breakdown from conservatives. If Biden had done this before the last election, then they would have made this like one of the key lines of attacks. He can't keep America safe. He's leaking information to America's enemies or whatever, using Signal in an unsafe way. Like, they would have made a massive deal out of this, right? Now, we also had Josh Hawley in a similar vein. Don't even need to play this clip, but the same thing here, downplaying it. He says, this is what the leftist media is reduced to. So now we're griping about who's on a text message and who's not? I mean, come on. Who's on a text message and who's not? That's how we're going to frame what happened here, that you added a journalist without knowing about it. It could have been anybody that you added to this chat. It just so happened to be this specific journalist. You added him to a chat when you're discussing your plans to bomb a country. And he's framing this as, oh, come on, now we care about who's in a group chat with their friends? Like, is this really a big deal? I mean, Jesus Christ. We also had Elon Musk and Lindsey Graham agreeing with each other here. saying that he agrees with President Trump that Mike Waltz is an invaluable member of his national security team and that he should continue to serve the president and the country. So the reason that Lindsey Graham loves Mike Waltz is because he's a hawk, right? He's an absolute war hawk, and he is staunchly pro-Israel. He's one of the guys in the administration that is not questioning of Benjamin Netanyahu in any way, shape, or form. And the guys who have been even mildly questioning are the ones who are getting pushed out, like Bowler, for example, and Elon Musk standing by him, Lindsey Graham standing by him. We had Mike Johnson also defending Mike Waltz, Trump clearly defending him. So I don't think he's going to get fired at this point. And I think we understand the reason why. So I'll leave you guys off with that. Absolutely ridiculous story here. I mean, again, the surface level conversation is about the incompetence, right? This is ridiculous. How could you possibly have accidentally added an unknown third-party journalist to a chat where you're talking about war plans? Like, it was a chat that had the vice president, the director of national intelligence, the head of the CIA, like national security advisors, the secretary of defense. This is not like a mild fuck up here, right? So that's the surface level of it. But again, the deeper levels of it are, number one, how journalists, are more interested in protecting the interests of the national security state than they are of informing the public, right? And how they want to maintain close ties to the inner circles of the highest levels of government to protect their access journalism. That's another level. And then the main level that people really should be focusing on here is the substance of what they're actually talking about. Bombing the Houthis. For what purpose exactly? Again, to defend Israel's right to starve, to displace, and to kill the population inside of Gaza. That's why we're bombing the Houthis. It's not even necessarily to protect the shipping lanes for freedom of navigation or whatever, because the bombings are not going to work to that effect. It's not going to stop the blockade. So it's just a pointless, bloody, unauthorized, illegal war that the Trump administration is continuing from the Biden admin. And, they're doing it to defend Israel's right to commit a genocide.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying